Yeah, it's nice to see you all again. Welcome to the Societies and Sports Corps Officer Training. If you're not aware, we're merging these trainings now between the Societies and Sports Department because we're kind of a new student activity team. So instead of being separate, we're all kind of merging as a team. Obviously, Societies and Sports will stay separate, so there's nothing to worry about on your side, but it's just us as a team. We've merged into a little bit more so we can kind of help each other out during what is obviously quite a challenging time at the moment. I think we hope you are all well during this. We're looking forward to seeing some of you back. Only about a week to go now, so yeah, looking forward to that. Yeah, so we might as well crack on. So I'm going to hand over to Dom for the second slide.
Okay, welcome everyone. So I think Jack, who's got the control of the slides? Me. Yeah, so yeah, I'm Dominic. For those of you that don't know me, I'm the Student Activities Manager and head up the team that we have here in the Student Activities team, which is made up of the Sports Department, the Societies Department, the Volunteering Department, and Rebel, and also reception, and my colleague Ray also helps us along with that. Yeah, Lewis, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself?
Yes, yeah. So the impact wise. Yeah. Hello everyone. So yeah, Jack and Dom have covered it. We are now one joint team, the student activity team. We are working in two separate bubbles. So Dom and Jack are in the office. I'm currently at home, and then we basically swap a couple of days each week. So we're all working together during this sort of unprecedented time, but hopefully it's the start of something positive for us all, and we can get through it.
Cool. Yeah, and as my name says, I'm Jack. So I'm the same position as Lewis. So one of these student activities coordinators. So what are your roles? So you guys as core officers are presidents, vice presidents, and that's only on the sports side, because on the society's side, we don't class the vice president as a core role, but that's because the titles are different. So you also have secretaries, treasurers, I should say treasurer, welfare officers, and COVID officers. So together you guys all have the primary responsibility for your society or club's day-to-day running. You must attend any executive committee meetings and student activities general meetings. Obviously, we'll let you know about any of those, but the executive committees are just the ones that you organise between yourselves, so you can catch up on important details that you need to give each other. You must attend any meetings called by the student activities team that are compulsory anyway, together with any of the training which the role requires. It would be your responsibility, along with your COVID officers especially, to keep up to date with the regulations surrounding COVID-19 at the moment. And this includes just making sure you're on your emails, checking from any updates from us, and as well as just trying to stay up to date with any government advice and guidance at the moment, and obviously on sports side as well, keeping up to date with what the national governing bodies for each sport gives. So president, so you guys are the main point of contact within your society or clubs. So your members will expect to receive regular updates on all types of information from you primarily. You'll usually be the first point of contact should anyone from the student activities team need to contact you. So again, as we said before, please make sure that you regularly check your emails and your sports and society social media pages for any information that comes out. Obviously, like it says there, you'll be the first point of contact, but again, sports that might differ depending on different roles and what pieces of information are being given to you. You guys will be responsible for making the bigger calls on decisions in the event of like deadlocks, if you have votes on stuff, for example. But as you all know anyway, I'm sure most decisions should be made by your members of your societies or clubs. The exec team is mainly there to help carry out the request of members anyway. And you guys are jointly responsible with the treasurers for carefully budgeting and spending money on behalf of your society or club. And you're responsible for making sure that your society or club doesn't break any laws. Again, that kind of stuff, it's really hard to break a law, but especially with the finance stuff, it's good to be careful. But that will be covered more in depth with the finance training, which is next week. So back to Lewis.
Yeah, so I think I've just seen a few messages pop up in the chat. I think that's our volunteering manager in the background of Jack making a bit of noise. So apologies for that. Obviously, I hope you can understand we are trying to do this as best as possible virtually. But yeah, nice one, Dan. He is a great guy, so he means well. Over to me then. So Jack's alluded to it already. The vice president and secretary role within a sports club are very, very similar. And actually, just a quick note, we are aware these slides are very text heavy. We're not expecting you to just instantly absorb all this information, but they are going to be sent out to you. They're going to be there for others who missed this training to review. And therefore, it's impossible they have all the information without us being able to explain things. So you can use the chat function if there's anything you think we've missed, but yeah, you'll be able to relay this information to others and look back on it in your own time. But the vice president role, as is on screen, is there to, in essence, support the president with their everyday position. That includes things like taking notes at meetings, whether that's an exec meeting or perhaps a general meeting or even a meeting with a member of staff, and then relaying this information back to the rest of the committee with things like actions and dates for these actions to be completed and so forth. The student activities team, as we've merged, will hopefully also merge together when we review things like standards and club and society awards. And so therefore the vice president or the secretary will be responsible for putting this information together and getting these awards sent over, these award applications sent over to us, usually around middle of term 2. But of course, we share the dates for these sorts of things within plenty of time. You're also going to be responsible for deputising for the president if they're ever not available, as well as taking on some tasks and training that the president may delegate to you. And of course, this year, you're going to have a joint responsibility for all COVID-19 protocols, guidelines, and just ensuring your members and the rest of the committee do follow these to the letter of the law, because I'm sure you'll agree it's not ideal and it's very difficult, especially with the announcement earlier in the week that indoor sports are now at an even smaller capacity than what was expected. But by following these rules, it does allow us to keep taking part and keep these activities going. And similarly with societies, actually having something there is better than nothing. So we do hope that you adhere to these, and of course you can ask staff members any questions at any point. Okay, on to the treasurer. As Jack mentioned, there is your own specific finance training. So this is a very brief summary of what your role is. Essentially, you are the money person. You're there to help with budgeting and ensuring your club or society spends their money, spends it wisely, and don't go into debt. There are plenty of ways we can help you with this, and that's not just the student activities team. Our finance team, who will be at the training next week within the Students' Union, are always happy to meet with clubs or societies to sit down and go through your budgeting, your expenses, anything like that. But essentially, anything that costs money will go through you, perhaps the president as well, whether that's making orders, making... Also, I'll answer that question in a sec. Any orders, anything that costs money for your club or society will go through you, and you'll be there to sign it off and ensure your club or society has that money. The question that's just come up in the chat: what happens if a club or society goes into debt? The first answer to that is we aim to make sure that doesn't happen. And if you are getting close to that, because we monitor your accounts as well, you will be asked very quickly to come in for a meeting or to have a chat with us and explain what's going on. This will be in more detail on Tuesday, but within a sports club, there are 2 separate budgets because you have an allocation from the university and the SU that goes directly to you, as well as your own savings account. Societies don't actually get that direct grant. So there's a little bit of a slight difference between the 2. But yeah, Dan's just put it in the best way. You can fundraise to top up your money if you're struggling, but we may ask that you lay out your plans to us in more detail if we think there's a risk of you going into debt. But hopefully that won't happen. Click as well is another good one. Cheers, Lyle. Okay, last one from me for a little while is the welfare officer, and the welfare officers also have their own training next week. So this is just another summary of what your role will be. But what we want from this role is it's really important. It's a really important role because it's there to ensure your members are happy, that they feel safe, that your club and society is a welcoming place for them to really enjoy and make the most of. So this could be various things. We're not expecting you to be actual sort of mental health professionals and do everything yourself. You may be the first point of contact as a welfare officer to refer someone to services like SU Advice, to student support, to Mind, to Samaritans, to all these services that exist that your members may not be aware of. You are there to make sure everyone feels safe, whether this is social events, this is at matches, this is any fundraising on squares. It could be any club or society related activity. You're there pretty much to make sure everyone is fit and healthy. So we're going to this in more detail next week. But just to let you guys know that this is a core role, and we do want every club and society to have someone in this position. And of course, this year they may have additional responsibilities with all the COVID protocols. So quite a few clubs and SOCs are doubling up as the welfare officer doing the COVID officer role, but others may wish to keep them separate. So yeah, we'll talk about that in more detail next week. It's just a summary there for you all to review.
Cool. So I'm going to pass over to Dom now, who's going to go through the COVID officer information with you. There is a lot of it, so I do apologise, but it is really important stuff, because if we break rules and we get reported, then there can be big fines. So we really do want to avoid that. So over to Dom.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Jack. So this is a really important area that we need to talk through. So I apologise that it's going to be quite a lot of information, but it is really, as I say, really important that we get this information across to you in the clearest way that we can. And if there's any bits that are a bit vague, come back to us and we will try and find out the answers. It's worth noting that as you've probably seen, if you watch the news, there's been a lot of changes in a very short space of time, and there's a few things that are a little bit unclear. So obviously, due to the pandemic, the ongoing pandemic that we have, it's now a new compulsory role for all clubs and societies to create a COVID officer role. If you do not have a COVID officer, you will not be able to do any in-person activities, such as the importance that this role now has. So obviously the point of this officer is to ensure that all clubs and society activities are adhering to strict guidance that has been set out by not only government, but the university and subsequently your clubs and society policies. So next slide, please. As a COVID officer, it is your responsibility to act as the primary contact for all activities that your club or society, all organised activities that your club or society are running. And obviously we'll go through each bit, but you are essentially responsible for making sure that this session that you are attending is run in line with the relevant risk assessment and operating procedures. And that's something new for activities this year. For you to do any activity, you will need to have an approved, signed off risk assessment and operating procedure. And if you haven't submitted that, please submit that as soon as possible, because it can take 2-3 weeks for us to get the necessary approval through the necessary channels. In terms of who can be the COVID officer, I should stress that if you are a bigger club or society and you've got a lot of members and lots of activities going on, you may want to consider having more than one COVID officer. But what is really important is that you have someone who is coordinating it all. When you are writing your risk assessments and your operating procedures, if you are a club or society that have more than one COVID officer, you will need to specify who's going to do what roles and have what responsibilities. It's not sufficient to just say the committee will check people that have booked onto sessions. You will need to be quite specific. Obviously, if you only have one COVID officer, then that's quite clear. We know who that person is. Do we need a risk assessment form for the Freshers' Fair? No, you won't need a risk assessment form for the Freshers' Fair, because the Freshers' Fair is not an event that you are organising. It's an event organised by us centrally, and we have quite a detailed risk assessment, event plan, operating procedures, this, that and the other. What you will need to do though is make sure that you have returned your agreement forms, and at the moment I've only had about 30 club and society agreement forms. If we don't get an agreement form, you won't be able to be at the fair, so please, it's quite a simple form. You just need to read, understand, sign and send back to myself, and that's fine. You'll have your stall, which we've allocated on the map. So as I said at the start, these guidelines have been written in advance, and some of the stuff that we go through, it may well have changed since we wrote this. So obviously what we are looking to do with regards to giving you guys the most up-to-date information is have a page on our website which has the most up-to-date information as and when we receive it and are informed. Next slide, please. So as a COVID officer, you will need to work with your club or society committee to ensure that the session that you are doing is compliant with the guidance. You will need to ensure that all members that are attending the session are fully understanding of the guidance and the guidelines of the session. So what we mean by that is make sure that everybody in your activity are aware of the risk assessment, and it's, you know, that it is freely available for people to read before they book on. And also you're going to need to liaise with ourselves and the Essex Sport team if you're a sports club in ensuring that you are fully compliant with these sessions. I think a lot of people are a bit nervous about not wanting to create an outbreak of coronavirus at Essex. And again, if you read the news, there's been a lot of articles just in the last 48 hours around universities where there have been outbreaks where individuals haven't followed social distancing protocols. We don't want that to happen at Essex. We don't want to be in the news for all the wrong reasons, and we definitely don't want that to be clubs and societies that are potentially the cause of that. So, and I'm sure you guys don't want to be on the wrong end of a news story. So what we will do is, obviously we're making an assumption the COVID officer has seen the club or society risk assessment and operational plan. If you haven't seen it, please let us know and we can send you the one if we've received it. There are some clubs and societies that we still yet to receive those forms from. Next slide, please. Just whilst we're moving to the next slide, the agreement form, there was an email sent out to all club and society. There was an agreement form sent out to all club and society contacts the other day by myself. So look for an email from Dominic King, and you need to return that to my email address, which is dsking@essex.ac.uk. Yep, slides will be available. I will send that out after. Okay, so what else do you need to do? You need to ensure that the session, that whatever session you have, that you are implementing a pre-booking system. So if you're a sports club that uses the university facilities through Essex Sport, there will be a booking system, and all players will need to be booked onto that session. The reason for that is that we have got strict capacity limits that we have to adhere to, and we cannot go over even by one person. Otherwise, everyone in that session will risk being fined, and potentially further issues could come up. In terms of at the actual session, you will need to remind people that are attending the session that they must maintain social distancing, and you need to be quite strict and quite firm, even if these are your friends and your mates. If they haven't booked on the session and you've got a full session booked, you cannot let them in because you will be over your capacity. We'll come on to some support that we can give you a bit later, but in terms of how the session is managed, we also need to think carefully about if you're using an indoor space, that you don't have loads of people all turn up at the same time and suddenly, you're breaking social distancing. You need to think about where you're going to meet. If you've got 30 people that are meeting for a session, try to avoid all 30 people turning up at the same time. So think about that in terms of when they're doing their bookings. Can you split them into smaller groups, get them arriving in, say, 5-minute intervals? It just makes it a lot easier for you to be able to manage that session safely. We'll come on to it in a second about some other things you need to do, which is another reason why you might want to spread it out. So yeah, I can't stress this enough. This is a really important role, and the club committee need to be fully supportive of this officer's role and responsibility, and maybe give more support, because the COVID officer will need to be responsible for collating the information from the members, so including coaches. So if any individual happens to get COVID symptoms who has been involved in a session, they need to inform the COVID officer so that the COVID officer can follow up with the registers that have been kept to ensure that the test and trace process and people are notified who have been in contact with that individual that has those symptoms. In terms of, I'm sorry, the chat function is going there. So the individual who has the symptoms will need to isolate and get a test as soon as possible. I know the university have got their own internal procedures on making sure that every student is tested twice, I believe, when you first come to university. And there may be further support mechanism for getting extra tests. I don't actually know myself at this stage how that's going to work, but we'll try and find out and let you guys know. Next slide, please. So a little bit of a run through. Anybody who's going to a session will need to carry out a pre-session health questionnaire, and that again happens at the very start of that session. There is one step just before that, actually, is please stress to all your members, do not leave their house if they think they have some of the symptoms associated with COVID, because if they do have it, they will no doubt spread it between leaving their home and arriving at the session. When people arrive at the session, there's a simple list of questions for you to ask them to double check that they haven't got any of these COVID symptoms. If they say yes, then you will need to advise them you have to turn them away from the session, advise them to go home, isolate and book a test. If providing they're okay and they don't have any of the symptoms, you will also need to note down, well, first of all, check that they've booked onto the session, note down that they, if they're in a bubble. So what we mean by bubble is there's some sports can have more than 6 people if it's outdoors, attend a training session, but depending on the governing body's guidance, they might have, like football, for instance, could have 30 people, but they would be in 5 bubbles of 6. So generally there's a rule of 6, around no more than 6 people in any one group. There are some exceptions to that rule, and the best thing and easiest way of doing this is to double check against your governing body. What's really important is that we are getting those records, that they're accurate, and we get them as soon as possible from the session. And that needs to be sent to us so we can keep hold of that data securely. it goes without saying, all the data that is sent to us will be kept securely and in line with GDPR requirements. And if you're the COVID officer and you're sending this information, please delete that that information as soon as you've sent it. We'll confirm as soon as we've received it, and then you can delete that information. So we're not going to specify to you exactly how you collect that information, because we know that in some situations having a laptop might not be a viable option. So it might be that the old-fashioned having a pen and paper and noting down who was at the event. But please make sure that you make time to type that information up and send it across to us. And as we've said in the slides, we've put a deadline of no more than 24 hours after that session. If you are a club or society that has 2 sessions within the space of 24 hours, you will need to do that as soon as possible, because we will not permit further sessions to happen until we actually receive those registers. Okay, so go through the process, collect the information, send the information across to us. If there's an outbreak or an issue with any of your members, then you will need to report that to us, and we can double check and do the follow-up with you. If for some reason you need to keep records of attendance, then obviously you'll need to check that with us, and then it will also need to be kept in a password protected document. And the general guidance is that for test and trace purposes, this information needs to be kept for 21 days. After 21 days, that data will be destroyed. The only information that we may keep is the number of people that are at sessions, just for statistical purposes, but individual information will be removed. There is a link at the bottom of that slide if you want to find out more about the test and trace. But if not, we'll move on to the next slide. So yeah, this is really important. You cannot run a session without a COVID officer being present. So if the COVID officer, your specified COVID officer is not able to be at that session, it is expected that another club official, society official will be appointed and carry out those roles and responsibilities. So that's why it's really important that the whole committee understand the process that's required for this COVID officer. If no one's able to deputise, no one's had that training, no one understands it, you have to cancel that session, that match, whatever it is. You cannot, and can't stress this enough, if we find that sessions are happening without COVID officer and we're not getting the information, we'll have no choice but to suspend the activities of that club or society until we can show that that's actually going to happen. Okay, I know it's quite draconian, but unfortunately the risk level is just too high to take and allow any chances like that. Next slide, please. So in terms of how COVID is spread, there's really 3 main ways that COVID can be spread, and it mainly is around the transmission of droplets in the air through contaminated surfaces, and yeah, so just go for it. So what we're looking for is making sure we're having social distancing so that you're not getting too close, and that's why obviously we ask for in normal circumstances people to wear face coverings, because if you're coughing and you're sneezing, that's going to reduce the risk of if you do have the virus from that spreading. In terms of equipment, one of the ways to mitigate against the risk of coronavirus is to make sure any equipment that you're using, that you're making sure that it is clean, it's cleaned regularly. I know from previous experience, maybe some of that equipment has hardly ever been cleaned, so we do need to make sure that we are cleaning things at the start of every session, depending on the activity, probably throughout the session, and at the end of every session. So we will be within the activities team be looking to provide the appropriate cleaning products. It's really important that you don't just go out and buy cleaning products that you think are appropriate, because they have some quite potent chemicals, and we need to make sure that we meet COSH regulations on these substances that are in there. So yeah, we've been asked to complete detailed COVID risk assessment and operational plans, and these have been checked with the university. If you haven't already, I think on the Facebook group, we actually attached some guidelines, so the template themselves. They can be adjusted for societies as well as sports clubs, but there will be some further tweaks that we will need to make to those forms. I think I touched on it a little bit earlier, but be quite specific in your operational plan who's going to be responsible for what roles. They were just templates just to get you guys going, so hopefully they're useful. And yeah, so kind of touched on these next bits, but they're really there just to really make you aware of social distancing, not going over your capacities, making sure that you're adhering to your governing body's advice, and just generally being compliant with what you can and can't do. Next slide, please. So we have some guidance on here about, yeah, this is more sports club, I guess, but governing bodies have been asked by the government or the Department for Culture, Media and Sport to complete their own risk assessments and return to play. And that's what we mean by when we say contact your governing bodies and look at your return to play policies. I am aware that we do have some clubs and societies who don't have an official governing body. In that situation, we would just take what the standard government advice would be. Yeah, if you are one of those that don't think you have a national governing body, please contact us and we'll try and help you with that, because it's really important that we've got clear messaging, we've got the right forms being completed, and that they are signed off. So next point we have, so all players, officials, volunteers, spectators and members must undergo a self-assessment for any COVID symptoms. So this is what I touched on earlier. No one should be leaving the house, not even a coach, if they suspect that they or anyone they live with currently has any symptoms of COVID-19. And those symptoms specifically are a high temperature, a new or continuous cough, a loss of or change to your sense of smell or taste. And if you or anyone you live with do have those symptoms, you are required to self-isolate and seek further guidance on getting testing if you've got those symptoms. If you live with someone who's got the symptoms, you need to isolate. And the current government guidance is that you don't go and get a test. You have to isolate. Obviously, if you get symptoms, then go and get tested due to the shortage of national tests. Okay. So participants should be made aware of any risks associated with your activities. Again, this comes back to the risk assessment. So they should also be strongly advised to comply with all health restrictions. And it goes without saying, avoiding any high risk behaviour outside of these activity settings to reduce any risk to other people that do attend. So yeah, participants are encouraged to follow the guidance, and particularly around things like travelling to the club or society events. And the current guidance is to avoid the use or minimise your use of public transport and limit car sharing where possible. So I know for some people that might be harder than others. If you live on campus or near to campus, then the guidance from the government is that you should walk or cycle. Obviously, if you are in a household and other people in your household going to the same activity, then you can obviously travel together, and or if you're in a support bubble with other people, the same thing applies. But the best thing to do is to check the government website with all the latest information. So one of the things that you should do, and apologies that we keep stressing, probably going over the same points, but is you should try at all times to limit the amount of time that anybody is congregating in any groups, like i.e. before a session or after a session, because that is when the biggest chance of the virus being spread will happen. So think carefully about when people turn up to sessions, think carefully about how many people leave a session when they leave. So when we eventually, hopefully one day, come back to having competitions, it will be thinking about making sure that both sets of players aren't leaving at the same time, making sure that one team's on one side of the pitch in terms of substitutes and the other team's on the other side of the pitch in terms of substitutes. No shaking of hands, goes without saying, no spitting, making sure there's no sharing of water bottles, obvious things where, you know, touching points, no hugs and kisses. Yeah, I know a lot of you like to do that. So yeah, and there's so many examples of things that we used to do, we're just not allowed to do at the moment. So yeah, if we move on to the next slide, please. So yeah, it just goes on a bit more. So at all times, you know, the virus doesn't stop when a training session begins. It's still there. So make sure that you are having socially distanced warm-ups. We've stressed about, if you're using shared equipment, that it's cleaned before, during, after, especially if it's being shared like from one session to another. We know that a lot of sports clubs are splitting their session. It's like a 2-hour session into 2 1-hour sessions. So we have to allow plenty of time for that equipment to be appropriately cleaned. And in some situations, need to think a bit carefully about certain bits of equipment, how we clean it, how we can be sure that we've cleaned that as thorough as possible. And that's all the stuff that's sort of included in your risk assessment. So yeah, in terms of the risk assessment, the point of it is to try and identify how can you minimize that risk. And you know, the key thing to note is you can't eliminate the risk of coronavirus. Okay, the risk will still be there, but what we're trying to do and trying to get you guys to think about in all your sessions is what things can you put in place to minimize it. So your capacity limits are one way of doing it. So there's less people in a confined area. You can space out more. If you don't have to be getting members to use club-owned or society-owned equipment, and they can use their own, then that's safer. Things like wearing of bibs. We would advise strongly against the club handing out bibs, collecting them all in. It would be better for individuals to have their own bibs or their own coloured tops, if that's something that you plan to do within your activities. Yeah, there's loads of examples. In terms of breaks in play, there's some guidance in there for specific sports. So football has a drinks break. Obviously they have their own bottles, and yeah, we'll send this information around so you can read it properly. We mentioned about water bottles, and then yeah, so yeah, mentioned that bit already about social distancing. So just remember, in terms of the rules around government, when you're in that training environment, you're under the rules of, you know, there might be exemptions for certain sports. the moment you leave that training session, you are back into the real world, shall we say, and the rule of 6 applies. So while you may have had 30 people being allowed to be socially distanced in groups on a football pitch, you will not be permitted to have 30 people walk back across the university to flats and etc. That will be breaching government guidelines. So really think carefully about how you manage that in your session. Next slide, please. So yeah, I've mentioned this already, sharing of equipment, avoid it where possible. We do understand that some sports, given the cost of some of the equipment, that this is not possible. And, you know, these are probably the higher risk areas. So especially anything to do with the head or face. So helmets, if you are a club that have helmets, so the ones I can think of immediately are American football and lacrosse, you will need to ensure that they are thoroughly cleaned and you give plenty of time for cleaning that. In terms of how you protect participants, yeah, there's lots of useful advice on the government website, but the easiest thing to remember is mostly the virus comes from you touching things and then touching your face. So at all times, make sure you wash your hands. And I said this at the start, but we will look to provide all activities with the appropriate hand sanitizer, stuff for cleaning your equipment and where possible. In terms of kit, a bit like the bibs, we would insist that people wash their own kit. I know that happens for most clubs, you know, anyway. So it's really, yeah, it's really important that people note that they should. I'd like to think people do this anyway, but who knows, that people wash their kit as soon as they return from their session. Do not sort of like, because the virus would potentially, if the virus is on there, it could spread to other areas, and you know, that there's an example of another outbreak. Other things to consider are balls, as well as obviously sticks and things like that. Balls are another place where, particularly any ball sports that involve touching it with your hands, you're going to need to think carefully about how you clean the balls regularly to avoid any sort of passing of the virus on. Okay, next slide, please. So it's not just the players on the pitch. This guidance applies to officials as well. Yeah, at all times, whatever activity you're doing, you need to observe social distancing. And that applies to referees in matches. So, you know, if they're not, then obviously please let us know. Obviously, make it clear to them in the most respectful way possible. No one should be getting in, invading anyone's space. Obviously, we accept that in some competition situations, there's guidance that permits, obviously, minimal breaks in social distancing. But where the risk is at its greatest, I guess, is the more time you spend in any one moment with someone, that increases the risk. So the general guidance out there is that you should not be spending more than 15 minutes, which is actually quite a significant amount of time, with one person in one space. If you do, and someone gets a positive test, you will have to isolate as well. But there's so many different rules out there for different activities. If in doubt, just ask us. So whilst we're talking about this, as I say, it's really serious. It's really important that as clubs and as societies, you double check your current policies that you have. So all clubs have a code of conduct. I believe societies do, don't they, Jack?
They will do. They need to like do them and submit them to us.
Yeah, so societies will do as well. And it's really, if you haven't, or have a read of your code of conduct. As a committee, you can update that at any point. It needs to be approved by the committee for it to be updated. And then what you will need to do is circulate your updated code of conduct to all your members so that they're aware. And we can put this information on the website as well. So, yeah, it's really important that people understand before they start any competitions or sort of training sessions or activities that they are aware of the code of conduct and code of behaviour. So, yeah, and as clubs, you may want to specify what you do in the event that someone goes to a session and is constantly breaking the rules around social distancing. Do you operate a first time a warning, second time banned from a month, banned for a week, third time banned for a term? Yeah, it's really important you don't just let things go, and you need to be quite firm on that as an officer role, but also as a committee, and be supportive of your COVID officer. So I guess another thing that's been in the news has been about the risk of increased risk of infection through activities such as singing at theatres. That's one of the main reasons theatres had been closed, was around projecting your voice. Obviously, it means that potentially if you've got the virus, it spreads a lot further, and that's why at a lot of events you'll see that music levels there's a limit on how high the music can be, because people start to shout a bit louder over sort of music, and that's actually one of the ways that the virus can be spread. So if at all possible, please try to limit any instances of shouting or conversing loudly with each other, and particularly if you're in an indoor area or facing each other, because that's where the risk currently lies. Next one, please. So that all being said, if somebody is injured in, let's say, like a sporting competition, the welfare of that individual is paramount. And what we're not saying is don't go and treat the person. Don't just leave them there, like, bleeding to death or whatever. It's really important that a bit of common sense is applied. So, but what you can do is put mitigation in place to minimize that risk. So if you've got a mask, put a mask on. If you're going to go and see someone and especially if you're getting close to their face, and obviously assess the risk as you would with any accident. If you need further support, then security team if it's on campus are all first aid trained. If you're off campus, then obviously there are non-emergency numbers you can phone first. Obviously, if it is an emergency, a genuine 999 emergency, then that's who you would phone. If it is on campus, you even if you want to get external support, you will still need to contact security, because they'll be able to open up the various emergency entrances that the ambulances can sometimes access. So, as with anything, if you're touching an injured participant, equipment or whatever it is, make sure you clean your hands thoroughly. Soap and water is sufficient, or the alcohol sanitizer. Just a point of reference, if you're using alcohol sanitizer, you should be using stuff that we would ideally provide you, but it does need to have more than 65% alcohol in it. Please don't drink the stuff because it is dangerous. It's for your hands, and yeah, it's also expensive stuff, so I wouldn't go drinking that stuff. yeah, general things: don't touch your nose, don't touch your mouth, don't touch your eyes. If you know, try to avoid it, especially, and at all times try and clean your hands. So we do have some physios that help us out with some of our sports fixtures, and again, the guidance out there is that all physios or anyone who's been treating another person will need to keep a record of who they've come into contact with for test and trace purposes. This is a new one this year. So unfortunately, again, partly to do with capacities, but also to do with just limiting the potential spread of any virus, there will be a rule of no spectators permitted at any training sessions, okay? The same thing will apply with society events. So if people haven't booked onto events, they should not be there. And you can politely ask them to leave. Yeah. In terms, sorry, the chat function keeps coming up in front of my slides. So obviously, if you are using another facility that's not the university, you will need to make sure you understand what their guidelines are, because there may be differences between what we permit and what other facilities permit. And you, as a club, will need to make sure that you are following their guidelines. They may have their own operating procedures and risk assessments on top of yours. So double check it, make sure you're clear, and that make sure that your members are clear and understanding that particular area. Next slide, please. So these are just sort of general guidance, pointers for you to understand. All venues, and this is guidance from the government, all venues will have clearly marked entrance and exit points around parking as well. You'll see when you guys arrive at Freshers Fair that we have in fact, I think most of you, you've probably seen the map. There's a clear one-way system in operation for all events, and that's to assist with social distancing and avoid any sort of people coming into contact with one another. Yeah, I don't really need to go through too much of this. Just for you guys to really know that there are set protocols that venues must follow around changing rooms and toilets and showers. We are saying, and actually it's government advice, that people should come ready to activities dressed in what they should be wearing, you know, to do the activity. You know, people shouldn't be using the changing facilities to get changed prior to training sessions. There are exceptions for under 18s and anyone with a disability. And they are literally like the two exceptions for around changing facilities. Obviously, if you need to go to the toilet, toilets will be available, but it goes without saying, make sure you wash your hands, use hand sanitizer, soap, water, etc. Again, we'll move on to the next point. I touched on this earlier. Obviously, do not share water bottles. Please make sure members, if you are involved in sport especially, bring their own water bottles, and please ensure that people avoid rinsing their mouths out or spitting on an area of the playing field, because you don't really want to be landing in someone else's spit. Yeah, I also appreciate that in some situations, yeah, if you need to do that, you go away from the area. Yeah, so next bit doesn't really apply. I guess it's more like the SU Bar. Club R is sort of our clubhouse. They also have to adhere to strict guidelines around what you can and can't do. And again, there are different rules there around the rules of 6. And with the SU Bar, we're doing it. You have to book to be able to go into the bar, is my understanding. So the next bits are just general guidance. So if you are in a room, if you're in an indoor area, It should already be, but make sure that the windows, the doors are open, that you've got plenty of ventilation, as that's one way of reducing the risk of the virus lingering in the air and causing any problems. So yeah, I've kind of touched on facilities generally will be closed, like changing facilities will be closed, but the other exception was around first aid as well. So if first aid provision needs to be carried out on campus, we do have first aid room in the sports arena and the sports centre, and security are also trained in first aid.
Okay.
So there's a lot of information that I've gone through, and I will say we're all learning this process together. So apologies if I've sort of brushed over any areas and not fully explained it. Feel free to drop the message. I've seen the chat function going off. I haven't obviously been reading it, but just because some of the other guys are replying. But what we will do, as I said at the start, we will try our best to get the latest information, the most up-to-date information that's relevant for clubs and societies. And we will, there's a helpful link there that the guys have pulled together, and that's where we will store the information. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that might be the last slide for COVID. Yeah.
So
Thank you very much for your time in listening to me talk about a very dry subject, but a very important subject.
Cool. So yeah, we will try and get through the rest of this as speedy as possible, because I know that was very long. So thank you for your patience. So in terms of documentation this year, again, this will be a little bit of a mix between some things that societies will have to do, some things that sports will have to do, and some things that we're kind of trying to merge for both. So we're not trying to get in documents from one place or another, and it'll all get mixed up otherwise. We have a terms of reference, code of conduct, constitutions, a budget plan, a declaration of financial responsibility, and an alcohol policy. As it says there, all documents will be downloaded, can be downloaded soon from the new student activities resources page. That's the one that's going to look like what the society's homepage was last year, but we've kind of reworked it a little bit so that you guys as exec members have a bit more of a page that's just kind of your own one, where all the resources will be pulled together. The terms of reference, it will just be kind of the go-to document for all society and club policies. It'll include stuff like how to do elections, or the process with elections, so about your finances and how to resolve conflicts or disputes. Doesn't need to be signed, it's just a good resource to use if you ever need to go back and reference something, or if a member tries to challenge you on something, you can say, this is the policy, take a look at this document. Or even the other way around, members can sometimes challenge you on certain things and say maybe what you've done is not in line with the policy. So yeah, the code of conduct. So you need to work with your members and your other executive members to create a code of conduct. That'll include regulations on how members should act at society events, as well as certain things on social media guidelines. It should be accessible to download through your individual society websites, as well as posted across your various social media feeds. In terms of how to upload this to your web pages, there is a function to do that. Some of you might know how to do it, some of you might not. If you don't, then we really advise coming to the communications website and social media training, which I think is next week as well, because we'll kind of talk you through how to use certain functions on the website. So again, the code of conduct, it's recommended. This is what we had for societies last year. I'm not entirely sure about sports, but what we kind of recommend really is having like a 3-strike policy, or something similar to that. So if a member continuously breaks your society's agreed policy rules, then they can face disciplinary procedures, which are meant to say student activity staff, but they'll be agreed. If you have policies like that, it would just come to us. We'll just agree it with you, so that's what you can use. Because obviously we don't want someone being banned for something silly, but we also appreciate that some members like to push boundaries sometimes. So it's good to have these sort of things in place. Societies and clubs will need to complete their own constitutions, and they'll set out different things like aims and objectives and your membership prices. Again, we're looking to combine that, but it may be that we keep them separate depending on how different things are. We're still kind of working through that. This is all still very new to us, so thank you for your patience on different things. Again, by being a core officer, you agree to the SU alcohol policy. Again, that will be on the webpage soon, so just make sure you have a read through that. It's pretty self-explanatory stuff. It's basically just really easy rules to follow, but it's just good to know anyway. Both the President and Treasurer must sign the Declaration of Financial Responsibility and then scan and send it into either the Societies or the Blades email addresses. Again, they're just really simple things, just sort of do's and don'ts, and you're agreeing to certain SU policies. Budget plan, this is something that I know that societies have, but I don't know about sports, but it's basically a document that we'll upload, which is good practice to use. It's not compulsory, but basically it's there for backup for you guys, really, where you can make a budget plan, send it out to your members, and then give them a period of time in which they can query any projected spending. And then once it has passed that deadline of when you've given your members to sort of query anything, then you have backup for yourselves as exec members to be able to say, we put this out, it was agreed to by all of our members, you didn't raise this specific point, so you're sort of you're more covered by this plan that you've made. So as I think I've said already, the Declaration of Financial Responsibility, just certain financial procedures that you need to abide by. Disciplinary proceedings, when there's any conflict, the piece of advice we give normally is to reach out to individuals for mediation. That could be one-on-one basis or with another exec member that they might feel open to talk to. So during this meeting, basically what we try and say is try and be kind, be friendly, don't use any accusatory language. The easiest thing to do sometimes, or an easy habit to slip into sometimes, is if like your friend maybe is involved in a dispute, it's easy to pick a side. So just try and remember to be as unbiased as you can. And if you don't feel like you can be unbiased in a certain situation, then remove yourself from it and allow another exec member to take over and take the lead. Use a meeting to fact find, and just see what obstacles are being faced by any individual within the meeting, and try and overcome them. If after this meeting there are no positive changes made, then you can call a meeting with someone in our team, and then you can do that just by emailing us, again, SU Socs or the Blades at Essex. We do have the separate societies procedure, which we introduced last year, which is like the panel of peers thing. So it's basically like a jury service style thing. We never had to use it last year, which I'm really pleased about, really. And I don't think we'll have to again. I don't think we'll have to this year. But if we do, then we have that in place and we can talk you through that at a certain point if you ever do need that. Goes without saying, if any kind of society or club issue involves bullying or harassment of any kind, then you need to go straight to SU Advice or student support. Essentially, we're not trained to deal with certain types of issues. So if you come to us with it, so if it's like an allegation of like racism, for example, then it will just direct you straight over to SU Advice or student support, and they can help you more. So I'm going to pass you on to Lewis.
Hello again, everyone. We're nearly there. Only 9 slides to go. Legal information. This probably may be a bit scarier than it actually is, but there's a few things we do need to tell you to save yourself some time, and also just so you aren't breaking any laws. So sports clubs and societies are not able to open any bank accounts of their own. So you can't walk into a high street bank or set one up online in the name of your club or society. The accounts you do have are basically like internal accounts, and they're managed, as we touched on previously, by the treasurer and staff members. So you do have a way of ordering things online and claiming back expenses and things like that. So hopefully you shouldn't need to set up your own account, but please do make yourselves aware this isn't something you are allowed to do. Sponsorships, basically, if you are looking to get a sponsorship, it is always something we'd encourage you guys to do to raise some funds. However, you cannot agree to things again without contacting a member of staff and showing us your sponsorship agreement and bits and pieces like that. For a number of reasons, this can be because there are sponsors looking to work with you that may be a conflict of interest. So unfortunately, you can't have a gym sponsor you because there's a gym on campus, bars and restaurants, coffee shops, that sort of stuff, where we have those competitors on campus, in essence, services we already run. We can't be supporting rivals. Is the ins and outs of it. So if you're not sure of can a company sponsor us, can someone give us a donation, just get in touch with us. We're always happy to help and just sit down with you and work it all through with you. And it's definitely best to do that early rather than leave it to the last minute and go, oh, can I just confirm this is okay? Because we don't want you wasting days or weeks having gone through everything. And then for one of us to have to be the bad guy and say, oh, sorry, that's not allowed. So yeah, we're always happy to help. Just get in touch with us. You can't come and see us at the minute, but Zoom, phone, email, any of that sort of stuff. Again, elections, a lot of these will have already happened. So you guys were elected into your positions probably around March time earlier in the year. But if you have vacant positions, if you've got people that have left their role and you need to fill those positions, obviously we can set up elections for you during the year at any stage. We will happily do this for you pretty much as and when. So if you're really desperate and you've got a few people that want to go for the same position, you need to hold an election, just get in touch with us and we can set it up for you. They'll all run just the same as the ones that you got involved with last year. They'll go through your SU webpage. There'll be a nomination period, a voting period, that sort of stuff. We can set it up pretty easily. So if you're a bit worried, maybe if you're in a committee where there's just one or two of you, or two or three or something like that, and you're like, oh, we need more people to help us out, again, we're happy to help you and happy to get this set up for you as soon as possible. So yeah, get in touch.
Cool. Yeah, so this slide is just basically to give you the link of where to go for the new or like the updated resources page for you. As I said, kind of keep checking it in the next few weeks because we're making it clubs and societies friendly. Like I said, last year it was the societies page. So it's a bit more societies friendly than it is clubs right now, but we're just kind of in the process of making that neutral and adding the information for both parties on. So we have the buddy system as well. So this was a societies thing last year. So basically we've merged this again. So it's designed to help students who might not feel confident enough to go to a society or sport event on their own without knowing anybody who'll be there. So as core officers, you guys will be the primary contacts for us to contact should students who feel anxious or nervous about attending events. If they use the form, we'll contact you. It will normally be the welfare officer. But if they sort of, you can choose to delegate it within yourselves as long as, we know who we're speaking to and who we're going through. Basically, we'll look to put you in contact with a student so that you can arrange to meet up informally and get to know each other, basically. Basically, just to give them a familiar face at an event and just someone to pair up to talk to get involved and to be in a group with if they need to. As it says on there, although it seems a little less friendly, these meetings at the moment should currently be held through Zoom. So they're just that we're as COVID secure as possible. We'll give you updates on as and when it is a bit safer to go out and meet people face to face. Obviously, if you wish to, you can go and sit in a park and meet face to face, as long as you're being safe. But it's going to get colder, so I would probably assume Zoom is going to be the most easy option to do. Yeah, I think that's what I covered in the last bit. Because of the Zoom aspect of it this year, it would just be probably quite it would be beneficial for you guys to attend the Zoom training session. Basically, that's going to be part of the events training session. So I should have I've meant to amend that. We were going to do a separate session, but then we realised we may as well merge it with the events one as well, because we'll kind of give you a little bit of useful information about how to use Zoom for events. I'm sure you've all picked up a lot of tips from Zoom across this summer period anyway, because you're using it so much. Yep.
Yeah, so this is a little bit like what Jack was saying, but it's specific to your new members. It's going to be a strange year. It's going to be totally different to what you all experienced when you came to university and you were able to go out and see people for a week or two at the start of term, or freshers fair, everything like that, where you could just do as much as you could possibly fit in into your day. This year we want you, we know it's going to be a challenge. We want you to be creative and really try and think how you can run your socials virtually, how you can do events that not just include first years, but include people that maybe are studying from home at the moment. They don't feel comfortable, that maybe they're shielding or can't come onto campus, but have been a member of your club for a year or society for a year or two. So it's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be something that Social Sex and all of you as a committee can put your heads together and get creative. But Jack's put together some really good things on there, things like Netflix watch parties and Jackbox and other games, which I know we've seen a lot of clubs and societies are already doing and have been doing, particularly during the lockdown period at the start of the year. So yes, just a little plug to keep that all going. Obviously, the beauty of it is clubs and societies can do things together virtually and really make some big events, just to make everyone feel welcome, particularly if you are a new member.
Okay, so the big event that we're all looking forward to, Freshers Fair. So if you haven't already, please reply with your club or society's agreement form, which basically is confirming you're coming. Please make sure you read that agreement form, because there's some significant changes to what we can and can't do at Freshers Fair. It is worth noting that there are very few physical Freshers Fairs happening across the country, and we have been liaising with the university and the local council, because obviously very mindful that we're in a pandemic. We have carefully thought through what we can do within the guidelines, and as you would have seen with the map that was circulated, we have put a number of protocols into place. So this year, obviously, there will be no, and stress this, there will be no handing out of any physical things such as leaflets, cakes, sweets, slices of pizza, that kind of stuff, unfortunately. The purpose of the fair is that, and the ticket sales have been very encouraging. A lot of people have said that they want to come to the fair. It will be an opportunity for you to talk to potential members about what your activities are and get them signed up. It probably will be one of the very few activities that people can do face-to-face, albeit socially distanced. And there are some restrictions obviously in place as to how many people we can have in the venue. This is done on the technicality that the multi-deck car park, although it's got cover, is an outdoor space. If it was an indoor space, it would not be permitted. So we are having extra precautions in place, such as asking all attendees to wear a mask unless there's medical exemption for not doing so, making sure people are socially distanced, and restricting the number of people that are in there. Some of the things that we've done to protect you guys and ourselves, so we are increasing the cleaning that takes place. There will be lots of sanitizer around for people to clean their hands. We'll also have sanitizer spray to wipe down surfaces that are potentially touched. We, as well as the participants and staff as well, will be wearing face coverings. This next point is actually more about what we're doing just within the activities team. So Lewis said it at the very start, but we've split our activities team into two bubbles. where we try our best not to mix those bubbles. So if one person within a bubble was to be get the virus, then we don't just take out the whole team. This is not strictly around Freshers Fair, but some important things for you to note if you weren't aware already. The activities office will be shut to students. It will just be staff that can access the office. But because we are looking after reception as well, that will be the point where you can meet us, talk to us. We're going to be launching very soon a virtual reception, which is good. So from the 5th, Monday the 5th of October, we will be having you'll be able to, from your own homes or wherever you are, talk to us through Zoom. And it again is reducing that risk of either us giving it to you or you giving it to us. So at the Freshers Fair, some of the other things that are in place, we will be asking all attendees to register through the NHS Test and Trace app. It's something that will happen with a lot of venues that we have on campus. So that simply is an app where you scan a QR code and it registers your visit to that venue, or in this case, that event, the Freshers Fair. All of the tables are socially distanced. So please do not move the tables. They will be set up for you when you arrive. We will have the one-way system in operation. In terms of the stairwells that are in the multi-deck, they will only be accessible for stool holders, and the stairwells will operate a one-way system. So the nearest stairwell will be an up stairwell, and the furthest stairwell will be down or exit stairwell. So just a reminder, don't attend any of the events or venues if you suspect that you have COVID symptoms or anyone you're living with have them. Make sure you sanitize your hands regularly, but especially before entering the event. Wear a face covering unless obviously you are seated and eating or drinking, but please try to wear that at all times. Download the app, as I've just said. We within the bar have an app called Round, which is what you'll need to do to be able to order your food and drink. I've already mentioned about the tables. Please don't move things because such as tables and chairs, because they will be in a place for a reason. Remember the rule of 6. That will probably change, but it's the rule of 6 at the moment. You can't go into any venues or anything in groups of more than 6. For Freshers Fair, we will still, even though if you're with your people in a bubble, we will still ask you to socially distance. It's just easier for us to ensure that people are not, that we're minimizing the risks. There will be clear signage throughout, detailing where you go. And what we're trying to do at the moment is identify the best way of promoting your stalls for you, so people know where you're going to be. So we have a very basic map, which obviously we've shared with you, and working with marketing to see if that can be done a bit better. But obviously the best way of sharing where you're going to be is for you guys to promote through your social media for people to come and see you. If people can't come to Freshers Fair, physical Freshers Fair, don't want to come to physical Freshers Fair, we will obviously be having a virtual fair, which will be running throughout October. Right, next slide, please. So on this screen is sort of a snippet of the agreement. Again, make sure you read it, understand it, especially the bit about when, if you're a stall holder, when you should be turning up to help us maintain and to avoid crowds. of people, especially stall holders in the morning, turning up, we are spacing out when people need to turn up. So if you are on the ground floor, you will be asked to turn up at 8:45. Okay, don't turn up before that because it won't be set up. Don't turn up after that point. Turn up at 8:45. Okay, if you're in the first floor, turn up at 9 o'clock. Don't turn up at 8:45. Okay, because we will have way too many people turning up in one go. Every single person that turns up at the fair will have to go through our freshers registration area, which will involve a temperature check. It will involve us asking some of the questions. You will be issued a wristband, and your wristband will indicate that you are a stall holder. Mentioned this on the message before that was sent out through the Facebook group, but if you are a stall holder and you are just going to be at the fair as a stall holder, you do not need to buy a Freshers' Fair ticket. We have a limit of 100 people per time slot. Across the weekend, I think it's about 2,600 people, but it is socially distanced, obviously, and yeah, if we have stall holders taking the tickets, it will mean that you won't get any visitors because the tickets have all been taken by the 250 stall holders that we have. So please make sure you're punctual, make sure you turn up on time, and also encourage anyone who you know has come to visit you at the fair that they turn up. If they've booked a ticket, if they haven't booked a ticket, they need to book a ticket. If we sell out of tickets, unfortunately, we are at the capacities that we've been permitted by the government, by the local council, and we would then advise people to talk to you through social media, through the virtual fair. So where you turn up, the registration area will be around the front of the multi-deck. So where you have the sports centre car park, and it will be somewhere around the edge near where the cars would normally enter the multi-deck. The process will be, you'll go through the registration, as I've just mentioned, you'll have the health check, we'll ask you to bring your student ID so we can scan that for our registration purposes, and we'll also ask you to use the NHS Test and Trace app. The reason we do the ID as well as the Test and Trace app is so that we've got the statistics on ourselves and who was at the fair. The Test and Trace thing is a national thing. We don't have that information, and that's why we do that. Yeah, you'll then get your wristband and you'll be asked to go and set up your stall. We are mindful that there's not a lot of time, particularly if you're on the third floor, from when the fair starts. The first slot is at 10 o'clock. But in light of the fact that people will spend probably the first half an hour, 40 minutes, probably on the first or second floor, you should have plenty of time to finish off setting up your stall. You will not be able to move your stall. It's pretty much a full fair, and it's been set out in an alphabetical order, which makes it easier for people to identify. You know, if they're looking for football, for instance, then they know that they need to go to F. Yeah, so yeah, please be respectful of your other stall holders, and please be respectful of the staff that are working the event. We have tried absolutely everything. We've put so much effort in to try and make this event happen. It would have been very easy for us to just say, we'll just do a virtual Freshers' Fair. So hopefully you guys are appreciative of the work that the team has done to try and put this event on. There is still a risk that it may not happen, but at the moment, you know, we've been given a green light, and yeah, just continually make sure that your websites are up to date, because one of the things that we will be doing is every stall will have a QR code which will link to your website. So if your website is not up to date or you've got incorrect information on there, that's the first thing that people are going to see. Okay, so yeah, other things to note. Oh yeah, so we've asked all stalls to be set up by 10, but we do appreciate that the top floor you may be very close to that. Key points. Yeah, no more than 2 people behind the stall at any one time. That's not to say that you have just 2 people at the fair for 7 or 8 hours that we're asking you to be there each day. If I was running a specific club or a society and I had 8 people in my committee, I would have 4 of them working on one day and splitting that in half, and then I have 4 working another day. And then that way you are all achieving your volunteering. It's, you know, you can use this towards your volunteering hours, and we'd encourage you to make sure you log those hours. Yeah, in terms of comfort breaks, we appreciate that probably everyone at some point is probably going to need to go and have a comfort break. You can bring your lunch and stuff with you. We're not stopping that, but obviously, yeah, if you do need to go and have a break, you need to follow the one-way system in exiting the rear stairwell. And we know that we will know that you have been health checked. You won't have to be health checked again on the way in because you'll have your wristband. So yeah, please try not to change. If you can avoid it, try not to have like your changes too often. If you can minimize the amount of people changing throughout the day, that's helpful with us in trying to manage the flow of people. Yeah, I appreciate there's one popped up that you don't, that's quite a lot of you probably don't have 8 execs, and that's going to be a lot of volunteering. Just all we ask is you try your best to be there as long as you can be there. In terms of the fair, we do expect all stalls. We're not going to shut tables down. We're going to have QR codes on the tables. The thing to note is if you decide to leave partway through the fair, there's potentially people that are on later slots who will go into the fair to talk to you. And if you're not there, then that could be a very disappointing position that they're in not being able to talk to you physically with your stall. Right. So yeah, obviously, if you are swapping, we will. You'll need to notify the stewards to make sure that they can communicate with the people on the ground floor. We won't just keep giving out wristbands. You know, people, you need to be in constant communication with us, and we'll have plenty of stewards around the place. Okay, next slide, I think. Yeah, so the other things to note, and again, another one of the reasons why we've been allowed to do this is we will be limiting the amount of people that can queue at each stall. So there will be no more than 4 people allowed to queue at each stall, because we know that each stall may have 2 stall holders, so that is a maximum of 6. But we will look to have some waiting points or waiting areas spread around the fair. Worst case scenario is you do a loop of your floor to go back to that area. Yeah, if you're obviously visiting, if you're a stall holder, you'll be at your store. Probably mentioned this already, but there is a no contact or non-contact fair, no giving out of any materials, leaflets, sweets, flyers, slices of pizza, anything like that. You can dress your stall as you see fit. So if you've got trophies and things you want to put on your stall, if you've got bits and bobs, but you do need to keep within the area that we have assigned for you. The tables are pretty big. I think they're all at least 6 foot long, which is plenty of space for you to be able to dress it with things about what your activity does. And I think Razor had put it in the chat, but it's on here. We will provide a QR code displaying on your stall, which will link people to your website. One-way system, I've mentioned. Electricity. So unfortunately, there will be no electricity at the fair. If you are planning on bringing like a laptop, obviously bear in mind it's quite a long period of time, so you might want to just think about that, how you manage that. I should also stress, when I know quite a lot of clubs or some clubs and societies have had people pick up a pen at the table and write down their name. You can't do that. You will need to, if you're collating lists and things, you will need to ask them for it and type it. You can't, just bear in mind what I said earlier about COVID. Like, you know, if you've got a laptop there, don't just turn the laptop around and say, yeah, can you just type your email in? Because that's a surefire way of us spreading something we don't want to be spreading. Yep, be respectful. No alcohol, as with any fair, no alcohol at the stall. If you want to drink that after the fair, that's up to you, but definitely not at the stall. Be professional. The fair will finish at 5 o'clock. So again, please make sure that you sort of listening to what the stewards are asking you to do. And yeah, I guess one thing that isn't on here, which is quite important to note, as I said, across the 2 days, there's capacity for 2,600 people, which is 100 people per every 30-minute slot. Bearing in mind, if you're quite a popular activity and you've got a queue of 4 people waiting, try to limit the amount of time that you are talking to people, because for all you know, your 4 spaces are filled up and you've got another 4 people waiting further down who want to come and talk to you. So try and keep the conversations to a minimal so that you can talk to as many people as possible. Yeah. Bear in mind, although there's 2 of you on the stall, still try to maintain your social distancing and try not to face one another. It's not so much of a problem if you're side to side, but if you're facing one another, obviously you're going to have PPE on anyway, hopefully, and yeah, that's fine. So at the end of the day, on the first day, we will just simply ask stall holders to don't move the table. We'll just collapse the tables down so that they're sort of not on their legs, so to speak. And then we will make sure that on the second day, obviously they're put up. On the final day, we may well ask for support in collecting the tables in, depending on how many staff members we have available to support the breakdown of the fair. We do have some PPE available. We know that we do ask people to wear their own masks if you've got them. We do have some gloves should people need them. Obviously, we will provide sanitizer throughout the fair. Hopefully that answers that one. Yeah, okay, so most important thing, because I've only had about 30, maybe 40 now come through. Sign the agreement or read the agreement. Hopefully you agree with the agreement, sign it, send it across, and then we'll see you at the fair. There won't be any barcodes this year. There's no need for that because we're operating a free membership throughout the month of October, and people can, using the QR code, go onto the website and check out for your relevant club or society. I think that's covered most things. Was there another slide? No. Okay. Yeah, in terms of your volunteering, you can log your hours through the V-Team page on the website, and that links to Grad Intel. And yeah, like Freshers Fair is an amazing event. Just having all those people in one area. Obviously, I won't lie, I'm a bit nervous, but I'm sure you guys will be respectful with what we're trying to put on with you guys, and everyone will follow the rules. And if you do see anyone who's not following the rules, please shout it out. And yeah, collectively we can try and make sure it's an event to be remembered for all the right reasons. Cheers, thanks.
Cool. So yeah, with the Dom, can you mute yourself?
Yeah, sorry.
Cheers. Yes, with Freshers Fair, we said about obviously having the QR codes that will link straight to your website. So just make sure that you are updating these before the event. As I said, on the, I think it's, I can't remember off the top of my head which day the communications, social media and web training is. But that is before the Freshers Fair, and we'll run through with you how you can edit your pages on the EssexStudent.com website if you don't know how to do that. But if you do know how to do it, then you can do that now if you've got the admin rights. If you haven't got the admin rights yet, then just let us know, and we'll keep going through them as and when we get the time to do them. Just make sure, obviously, you bought your membership, because we can't apply, it's not us being just nasty, we actually can't apply admin rights to you if you haven't bought your membership. So make sure you've got that. But to do that, yeah, basically all you have to do is just go onto the top right hand corner of your society page, and then there'll be like an admin tools or page tools button. I can't remember exactly what it says, but just that brings down a drop down box, and you can just put you click onto the admin tools, and then you can edit your page through different functions there. So yeah, and then finally on to the last slide with Lewis, which is just a question time.
We did it, and that concludes the first training, the core officer training. Put a little celebration emoji in the corner if anyone can see it. So well done for getting through an hour and 41 minutes of us talking to you. We obviously know that was a lot of information. It's all really, really important. We wouldn't have spent our Friday evenings doing it if it wasn't. But thank you to the 200 or so of you that have stuck it all the way through. It's really appreciated. Just, yeah, last little thing just to add on to what Jack said. If you are, I know a couple of sports clubs have struggled with admin rights, not sure if societies have as well, but if you are struggling to edit your page, or you don't know how, or you just want to give us some more work, you can by all means just email Blades or SU Socks with the changes you'd like to be made, and we can sort it for you. So yeah, just stay in touch with us about everything. If you have any questions, now's your time to ask. We've done our best to get through them all on the chat. But I appreciate there was a lot of them coming through, so if we have missed them, again, you can. I'm sure one or two of us will stay on this call for a couple of minutes if you want to ask, or if you don't feel comfortable speaking in front of everyone, by all means, put it in the chat again or email it to us. But yeah, just to wrap up and say thank you. Our contact details are on the screen now. The Facebook exec group is there, and just to confirm, we will be sending out the slides and this Zoom video to you all. But yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Have a happy Friday evening.